always a bit forced, maybe a bit over the top, a bit cheesy. And then 5 or 6 years ago, I joined a team that was developing what has become the School of the Spirit. It's been great to have people from this church on that in the last couple of years. And we thought about what sort of culture do we want at the School of the Spirit. And we came up with 5 values: safety and authenticity, compassion, honour, courage, all very good things, and celebration. And this was, yes, probably the harder one for me, because obviously when you're leading something, you need to model what's going on. I was possibly helped by the fact that in the latter part of our preparation, in our first year practically of School of the Spirit, we were in lockdown and therefore had to do everything on Zoom. And I don't know if you remember those early days on Zoom. You tried all the cheering and clapping and things together, and it just doesn't work. And so I think we stole this from somebody else, but it doesn't matter. This is what we developed, was when there was something good, instead of interrupting and taking the voice away from whoever was speaking, we would go like this. So you would have a screen of people going like this. Which is something that, even if somebody doesn't really celebrate, you can force yourself to do that. And it became so ingrained in me. This wasn't just a habit that, you learn for a season. This was how I learned to celebrate. And so even now, I've realised that when I talk to somebody and they're saying something good, my instinctive reaction is to go like this. It's a bit ridiculous. But throughout the time at School of the Spirit, especially, and being part of the team and getting to meet lots of different people and learning from them, I have learned to celebrate well. I've learned that it's important to celebrate the big things and the small things. And I've learned that it does us good, not just the person who's got the thing to celebrate, it actually does other people good to celebrate with them. And it's actually a really important part of building well. It's not just a tag on at the end, it's part of the whole concept of building well. So I'm much more celebratory now. I still have to choose. I still have to choose to celebrate in a way that other people will recognise as celebration. But it is much more natural for me. So I'm delighted to have this chance to share a little bit more with you about the topic of celebration. And hopefully, if there's anybody here who's a bit like me, you will get to see something bigger and catch a bit of a vision for being able to celebrate more widely. And obviously, we're going to be looking at a specific occasion in Nehemiah and how he celebrated along with the people. That's only one way to celebrate. There are many others. And so Pippa is wonderfully a little bit later going to share a testimony about how she incorporates celebration in her everyday life, so that we can think not just about the kind of grand occasions, but how we actually live out celebration. So, on to Nehemiah. Well, let's do a quick recap, because I'm sure you know the story well by now. So, excellent. But just in case you've missed something or you're here for the first time, let's have a quick summary of what's happened so far. So, time of exile, the people of Israel and Judah, really, as it is by this point, have been taken into exile. Jerusalem has been ransacked. And there's this one Israelite called Nehemiah who somehow got himself in the position of cupbearer to the king. He has a visit from some people from Jerusalem and eagerly asks them for news. But they tell him that Jerusalem is still in ruins, and he is devastated. He prays about this. He plucks up the courage to ask the king for permission to go back to Jerusalem and rebuild the walls. And by the grace of God, that favour is granted. And so he goes, he inspects and looks really carefully at what needs to be done and how to go about it. He gathers all the people together to be able to build together. So families, friends, neighbours were all building alongside, each with their own particular part of the wall. And somehow they managed to complete the walls in 52 days, despite quite significant opposition. But if you read between the lines in Nehemiah, you realise it's not just a practical work that was being done, but God was clearly also at work in the hearts of the people during this time. And once they finished the work, they decided to get together and ask Ezra to read the book of the law to them. And this convicts them so much of their own sin and their father's sin that they make a new covenant towards God to follow in his ways. And in doing so, they're almost rediscovering their identity as the people of God. They're no longer this kind of small tribe that's been conquered. They're rediscovering who they are. At the same time, Nehemiah realises there's a little bit of a problem in that a city in ruins isn't very attractive, and therefore everybody has moved out of the city to go work the land. And so he comes up with a plan to repopulate the city. So we're now at a time the work's been done, the people actually believe they're the people of God again, Jerusalem has a new future, and so it's time to celebrate. Unusually for Nehemiah, we didn't actually know quite when this happened. He usually gives us dates and things, but he hasn't done so. But I think we can assume reasonably safely that the celebration happened pretty quickly after the rest. You often celebrate after having done something, and the king wanted him back anyway. So, this is where we will pick up Nehemiah 12 from verse 27. At the dedication of the wall of Jerusalem, the Levites were sought out from where they lived and were brought to Jerusalem to celebrate joyfully the dedication with the songs of thanksgiving and with the music of cymbals, harps and lyres. The singers were also brought together from the region around Jerusalem, from the villages of the Netophites, from Beth Gilgal, and from the area of Geba and Asmaveth, for the singers had built villages for themselves around Jerusalem. When the priests and Levites had purified themselves ceremonially, they purified the people, the gates, and the wall. I had the leaders of Judah go up on top of the wall. I also assigned 2 large choirs to give thanks. One was to proceed on the top of the wall to the right, toward the dung gate. Hoshea and half the leaders of Judah followed them, along with Azariah, Ezra, Meshullam, Judah, Benjamin, Shemaiah, and Jeremiah, as well as some priests with trumpets, and also Zechariah, son of Jonathan, the son of Shemaiah, the son of Mattaniah, the son of Micah, the son of Zachariah, the son of Asaph, and his associates, Shemaiah, Azarel, Gilelite, Nahai, Nathanael, Judah, and Hanani, with musical instruments prescribed by David, the man of God. Ezra the scribe led the procession. At the fountain gate, they continued directly up the steps of the city of David on the ascent to the wall and passed above the house of David to the water gate on the east. The second choir proceeded in the opposite direction. I followed them on top of the wall, together with half the people, past the Tower of the Ovens to the broad wall, over the gate of Ephraim, the Jeshanah gate, the fish gate, the Tower of Hananel, and the Tower of the Hundred, as far as the sheep gate. At the gate of the guard, they stopped. The 2 choirs that gave thanks then took their places in the house of God. So did I, together with half the officials, as well as the priests, Eliakim, Maaseiah, Miniamin, Dankai, Eleazar, Zechariah, Hananiah with their trumpets, and also Maaseiah, Shemaiah, Eleazar, Uzi, Jehohanan, Malchijah, Elam, and Ezer. The choir sang under the direction of Jezreiah. And on that day they offered great sacrifices, rejoicing because God had given them great joy. The women and children also rejoiced. The sound of rejoicing in Jerusalem could be heard far away. At that time, men were appointed to be in charge of the storerooms for the contributions, first fruits and tithes. From the fields around the towns, sorry, I haven't been clicking this, have I? From the fields around the towns, they were to bring into the storerooms the portions required by the law for the priests and the Levites. For Judah was pleased with the ministering priests and Levites. They performed the service of their God and the service of purification, as did also the singers and gatekeepers, according to the commands of David and his son Solomon. For long ago, in the days of David and Asaph, there had been directors for the singers and for the songs of praise and thanksgiving to God. So in the days of Zerubbabel and of Nehemiah, all Israel contributed the daily portions for the singers and gatekeepers. They also set aside the portion for the other Levites, and the Levites set aside the portion for the descendants of Aaron. It's a very detailed account in many ways, and I considered skipping some of the things, but actually I think those details are important in what we want to think about today. Because for Nehemiah, celebration isn't this kind of wild, random thing, you just get the people together and let them do what they want. It's actually considered, choreographed, and collective. And if you're somebody who doesn't like the wild things, this might come as a bit of a relief. You can celebrate while still being reasonably dignified and thinking about it carefully. It doesn't all have to be King David in front of the ark. So what happens? Nehemiah, or the people, we're not entirely certain who seeks out the Levites and singers. Your translation might say musicians, that doesn't matter. People who are skilled in music and song. So they're deliberately sought out. There's a clear going to find them and bringing them back into Jerusalem. Why? Why do we need to do that to celebrate? Well, it's an important occasion. It's a very important occasion. And we've just seen that the people have rediscovered the book of the law. They've rediscovered how God wants them to live. And so they want to do this right. So they bring out the Levites because it's a holy occasion. It's not just the end of a building project. They've just been building the walls of the city of God. This is the holy city. This is a project that God has been leading from the very start, and so they want to do it well. And we're told that the Levites purified themselves, the people, the walls, the gates. That's a very brief description. If we go and look at Leviticus, if we look at other celebrations that have happened in the Old Testament, we realise that this involved massive stuff. This would involve sacrifices, the Levites would probably have had to wear special clothes, there'd have been a lot of water involved, a lot of sprinkling of incense and oil and blood and water. It would have been a really, really big preparation for this celebration. This was an important time of dedication, because a celebration isn't just looking back, it's also looking forward. And so we're going, this has been done, but we want to give it to God so we can entrust the future of this city and our future into God's hands. So we need to have the right people involved, and for Nehemiah at the time that meant having the Levites there to purify and prepare the people well. But they also have the singers. And that's because it's a grand occasion. They want it to be led well. They don't just want a scratch band, asking the public to call out songs to perform. They want some people who've been trained. Some of these people are descendants of Asaph, who you might recognise from the Psalms. These are people who've been trained in song, in worship for generations, who know how to lead well. And so they've been asked to come in and lead the people at this time of celebration. Not every occasion needs to have that kind of level of detail, but when we are thinking about celebrating, whether it's big or small, we need to ask, how can we honour God in this? It might not be Levites coming and performing purification rituals, but how do we honour God in this? And who do we need to get involved to celebrate this well? Different levels will require different responses, but those are important questions to ask. But it's not just the planning beforehand, the preparation that matters to Nehemiah. He also, I've gone really fast, he also choreographs it really closely. And we see here, I had the leaders of Judah go up. I also assigned 2 large choirs. He's as involved in planning this celebration as he was in planning the building of the wall. That's how important this is. It's not just something that you leave to the underlings, the small people to go have their bit of fun. This is really important. And having key leaders is really important. Having key leaders involved in the celebrations. Nehemiah had Ezra, he had officials, he had priests. Why? Because it's telling the people who have invested in this project that what they have done has value. And as leaders, whatever sphere we're in, it's really important to think, how can we honour those people who've been involved? What does my presence at this celebration say? Even if it's just for half an hour, how can I help value the investment of time, the investment of money, and in this case especially, the investment of physical effort? It's really important to celebrate the sacrifices that people have made, because it gives them honour. It also, in this case, showcases the achievement. This is an opportunity for the people to enjoy the fruits of their labour. You can just imagine they're walking along the walls and the sons of Hassanah are going, "Oh, do you remember when I hid your tool and you were looking for that hammer all over the place when we were building here?" Or as they come towards the broad wall, people go, "My goodness, didn't Aziel, that goldsmith, and Hananiah, that perfume maker, do a really good job here?" Or can you imagine the pride of Pedaiah and the temple servants as the people were walking towards the water gate, towards that part that they had built themselves? This was really important. This was allowing the people to enjoy what they had done. But it's also, actually showing what has been achieved. There's some question as to whether they walked along the top of the wall or alongside it. I'm going to go with they walked on top of it for several reasons. One is because it's a lot more fun. You get to go up and you see from up high. But back in chapter 4, you may remember, Tobiah the Ammonite jeered that even a fox would knock this structure over if it climbed up on the wall. Here are half the people on each side of this wall walking along, and it's standing strong. This was showing that they had succeeded where their enemies told them that they would fail. This is about truly celebrating all that has been achieved. Now, something clearly going on in my PowerPoint there, anyway. So questions are, how do we honour the people who've been involved, and how can we show off what has been achieved? Not in a prideful way, that's not what I mean by show off, but how can we demonstrate the fullness of this achievement? And as you've probably realised by now, there's a collective clamour. This is about gathering all the people together. We culminating at the temple, the thing that gives Jerusalem its importance. And we've gathered there. We've got our specialist choirs who are singing loudly. They're leading the people, all the people, including the women and children who are very clearly mentioned, just as they were involved in building the wall. They're involved in celebrating. This is about bringing everyone together and celebrating together, uniting in their joy. Not because everything's perfect. We'll discover very quickly that things are not perfect. But this is a time of choosing to celebrate together. And there's a contrast. I think you did Ezra earlier this year. And when they laid the foundations of the temple, they had a time of celebration, but some people wept because they could remember the glories of the old days. This isn't a time for nostalgia. This is a time where we choose to say, even if we can still see some of the ruins inside, even if the city is still only half populated, we are together going to choose to celebrate. And we are celebrating as the people of God. It was a loud witness. We're told that the sound of rejoicing could be heard far away. That's another reason I think they were up on the wall. Sound carries even further if you're up high. This was loud. This was a visual but also an auditory witness to the doubters around them who came from the regions around them, that God was victorious, that God had achieved what he had set out to achieve. But also, this celebration of God's faithfulness leads to a new commitment to ongoing worship. So just as Rachel mentioned last week about the wood that they were bringing for the sacrifices, they want to worship well. In this instance, the people are pleased with the services of the Levites and realise that it's really important to be able to essentially fund the priestly roles, the singers' roles, the gatekeepers' roles, so that worship can be done well. And so there's a new commitment to bringing offerings and tithes and first fruits, so that the worship in the temple can happen as it should, and that the priests and the singers aren't having to go work the land for themselves. They can dedicate themselves to the worship for the good of the people. So celebration should also lead us to ask, how can we continue to worship God more? It's not just about this moment now, but it's a reminder that God has done so much. How can we take that forward? And so my final questions for celebration are, who can we celebrate with? You can't always gather all the people of the nation together. But there's usually somebody at least you can share your good news with. Who can you celebrate with? And how can it lead us into greater worship? How can it push us forward into worshipping God, into serving God more? So to conclude, celebration is an essential part of building well, of seeing God's kingdom come to earth. It honours people, and that was a really important part of Jesus' ministry, was honouring people. And even if there were no other reason for celebration, that in itself makes it worthwhile. But celebration also honours God, which is obviously an essential part of building the kingdom. It helps us keep God at the centre, and so it's essential not just to having built, but also to future building. And this isn't in Nehemiah, but I always like to look forward as well. It gives us a taste of heaven. We know that there's celebration, there's worship, there's a wedding banquet in heaven. And so celebration is also part of that prayer, may your kingdom come on earth as it is in heaven. If there's celebration in heaven, we want celebration on earth. And it also, quite frankly, gives us something to encourage us in times of difficulty. We can look back and go, do you remember that time we celebrated God's faithfulness? Even if I'm not in that joyous place right now, I can still decide to pull some of that. And don't we have a great celebration to look forward to in heaven? Let's keep working on that. So I think we're going to pause for a time of commemoration, because some sacrifices need more solemn commemoration as well. And then Pippa will give us a brief story about how she shares celebration in her everyday life.